Hi everybody, TJ Mack Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here. You know, sometimes collecting isn't just about the cards themselves. It's about the stories that surround them. The moments, the headlines, the pages that bring those players and eras to life. For me, that's where sports magazines come in. They've become so much more than side pieces in my vintage card collection. They're like the missing chapters that fill in the story behind the cardboard. Recently, my friend Rick Acosta did a fantastic video where he talked about how much he loves his baseball card collection. And what really struck me was how he thinks about making his collection better. Not just about adding more cards, but by curating it, by shaping it into something that fits his home and reflects who he is. And that's a piece of what he said that I really connect with, that having a well cared for home makes your collection that much better. It's not a mishmash of boxes and just cards and magazines all over the place. There's a purpose behind it, and there's a curated way that it's set up to make it pleasing to the eye. And I couldn't agree more with him. Because for me, collecting has always been about balance. Balance with my budget, with the cards that I pick up and the eras that I represent, the nostalgia, the knowledge, the passion, and the presentation. I want my collection to look good, sure, but I also want it to mean something, to feel intentional, to tell a story. So in today's video, I want to share a few of the magazines I've recently added and talk about how they've deepened my appreciation for my card collection. Let's start with this true gem, the November 22nd, 1954 issue of Sports Illustrated, featuring 49ers Hall of Fame quarterback Y.A. Tittle. Now this is the first SI cover to feature a professional football player, and finding a clean newsstand copy without a subscription label is pretty tough to do. But what really makes this issue stand out is that helmet. If you look closely, it almost seems like there's a handle sticking out of the right side, and that's because there is. That's a metal stabilizer bracket, part of a special helmet created by the 49ers trainer after Tittle suffered a severe jaw injury against the Steelers in Week 9 of the 1954 season. The helmet featured a clear, custom-made lucite face mask, and while it offered protection, it also carried significant risk. If that lucite shattered on impact, it could send shards right into the mouth of Tittle. But YA was tough as nails. He played the last 3 games of the season wearing it, leading the 49ers to 2 wins down the stretch. Now this magazine, it really adds life to my 1954 Bowman Y.A. Tittle card. On that card, you'll notice he's not wearing a face mask, which changed after this injury. He's also shown without one on his 1955, 56, and 57 cards, but that's likely because they were either older photos or the face mask was removed for the picture. That was actually a very common practice at the time. Players would remove their face masks so that way they could be visible in the photos. Now some collectors think that those players didn't wear masks at all, but by 1955 the NFL made face masks mandatory unless you had a special exemption. Knowing that kind of detail, that connection between a photo, a card, and the reality of the player's season, that's what brings the history to life for me within my collection. Now shifting from football to hockey, this 1972 Hockey Illustrated cover featuring North Stars goalie Gump Worsley is another favorite of mine. I've talked about Gump before and how he is one of the best goalies of his era, but he was also one of the great personalities in sports at that time. Now this cover pairs perfectly with my 1972 Topps Worsley card. I also added his 1969 Topps card, which happens to be number 1 in the set. It's very fitting because he'd just come off a Vezina winning season as the league's best goalie with a career best 1.98 goals against average. But in 1969, he had a falling out with Canadiens management, and he ended up retiring early during the season and was being replaced by goalie Rogie Vachon. Then at some point during the season, the Minnesota North Stars convinced him to come out of retirement, and the Canadiens traded him. Now when this magazine came out in 1972, Gump was nearly 43 years old and was still playing without a mask. He finished that season with a 2.12 goals against average, third best in the entire league. You talk about toughness, that's Gump Worsley. Now when I flip through this magazine, I always enjoy seeing what was happening around the sport at that time. There's an article predicting the Bruins were going to win the Stanley Cup, which, let's be honest, really wasn't a stretch. They were a powerhouse in the league at that time. And it turns out they beat the Rangers 4-2 to win the Cup that year. But what caught my attention most was the way the writer compared Brad Park of the Rangers to Bobby Orr. Now at that time, Park was gaining some notoriety as a brilliant defenseman, finishing runner-up to Orr 4 times for the Norris Trophy as hockey's best defenseman. However, he had the bad luck of playing in an era with the greatest defenseman of all time. And it's really neat to read through these articles and then knowing you have those cards and holding those cards in your hand. It really brings those times and that rivalry to life. It's just something I enjoy about the magazines and the cards. Next up is the Sports All-Star Baseball magazine from 1960. I'm not going to dive into the articles today, but I picked it up mainly for this beautiful cover photo of Eddie Matthews finishing his swing, dust rising from the plate as he heads over to first base. You see the baggy flannel uniform and that Braves patch shimmering on his sleeve. It's just an image that feels like baseball. And Matthews was the premier third baseman of the era, coming off his 1959 season where he hit .306, driving in 114 runs and leading the majors with 46 home runs. He had that rare blend of raw power and the ability to hit for average that paired him up nicely with the great Hank Aaron in that Braves lineup. In this magazine, I wanted to add it to the displays that I've talked about building, where I'm pairing magazines with different cards for each year from the 1950s into 1989. And if you watch my channel for a while, I've shown off some of these arrangements in the past, but today I'm going to do 1960. You see, each one of these displays, it becomes a window into that era, the games, the heroes, even the mood of the time. For example, one of my favorite layouts is one that I'm going to show you here. It features a mix of baseball, football, and hockey, all from 1960. And this is just a concept that I'm putting together of what I'd like to do at some point. You see at the center I have Eddie Matthews magazine right next to a Sports Illustrated featuring Norm Van Brocklin from the NFL champion Eagles. Below them are true two icons that matched up in the 1960 World Series, Mickey Mantle and Roberto Clemente. Now to the sides, I have some of the heroes of the gridiron of the time. You got Johnny Unitas and Bart Starr, Forrest Gregg and Raymond Berry. And then across the top, there's some more football cards, but also some 1960 Parkhurst hockey cards. It's just representations of different players in those 3 sports during that time. And I have many other cards from 1960 that I can just keep changing it out and arranging it in different ways. As I mentioned, I can do different years. I can go back to the 50s or the 70s or even into the 80s. And each year has its own essence to it. Now when I look at this, the whole setup feels like a snapshot of 1960 itself. A moment where these three sports were brimming with character, change, and possibility. And you're going to see that also in this next arrangement I put together, because 1960 is the year the AFL started. So on the bottom, I have 4 AFL cards in the 1960 Fleer set. Ron Mix and Jack Kemp, along with Abner Haynes and Billy Cannon. So I can add that element of history into this display as well. And also there's stars like Willie Mays and Ernie Banks and Hank Aaron, along with some of the other great football players of that day from the NFL. It shows you the evolution of how the game has changed over time as you look at these displays. It's just a fun mix in a way that I love to collect. So I've got another 20 or so cards from 1960, like I said, that I can work in. I can create just dozens of different possibilities for this. And when I look at this, it transports you back to that time, to 1960. Time of Kennedy and Nixon. Time when neighborhoods had a steady rhythm. The laughter of kids outside. The hum of lawnmowers. The smell of supper floating through the open windows of the suburbs. Westerns ruled the TV, the good guys always won, and in theaters, a new movie reminded everyone to think twice before closing their shower curtain. And even though I wasn't there in 1960, my father and my father-in-law and other family members were. And I've talked about this before, that's my inherited nostalgia. It's like their memories have become part of my collection, woven in through the stories and the cards and the magazines that tell it. And that's really what I love about collecting. It's not just about owning a piece of history, it's connecting with it. It's building something that honors where we came from, the players, the games, the times, and displaying it in a way that keeps it alive. Every magazine, every card, every display tells a story, not just of sports, but of life, the passage of time, the endurance of memory, and the joy of rediscovery. Because to me, collecting at its best isn't about looking back, it's about keeping the past alive, one card, one story, one display at a time. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon.